Yo guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the most powerful Juubi demon in existence in DC Universe? Huge shout out to Chico Gamer 17 for this story. If you want more awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. With the war finally over, the elemental nations went through a period of peace like none other. The hidden villages, after working with each other to defeat Akatsuki, were now allied with one another, as they saw that cooperation was better than rivalry. The heads of the nations supported the idea of a global alliance, and pushed forward. Everyone prospered from the peace. The trade between nations and villages increased their level of technology, and thus made life easier, safer. Soon enough, the world needed the shinobi less and less as the months turned into years. Conflict was a thing of the past, and the world did not need any more warriors, any more weapons. The day when the world didn't need a protector had finally arrived, and the idea of world peace became a reality. Everything from kunai to paper bombs was being recycled for more practical uses for civilians. Cities to small villages only needed local police forces to maintain the quiet everyone wanted. Nobody needed assassins and killing machines anymore. And as the 5th-year anniversary of the defeat of the Akatsuki loomed in the horizon, so too did the fates of the village's weapons. At the heart of the continent stood the City of Hope, the capital of the world and all nations. This great metropolis stood for the realized dreams of the people. The combined leaders and counselors from the now dissolved villages resided behind the guarded walls. At the very center of the city stood a monolith containing all of the fallen warriors who had died in past battles. The monument served as a reminder to the people to what tragedies war could bring. Staring up at a set of names was Uzumaki Naruto, hero of the shinobi world war and savior of the planet. The now 21-year-old shinobi slowly traced the engraved names of his fallen comrades, committing the feeling of the smooth stone into memory. Gaara, Yujito, Yugura, Rashi, Han, Udakata, Fu, Kirabi. All were casualties in the war, hunted and killed for their burdens. They were his brothers and sisters in suffering, a band of outcasts. He didn't know why he was the only surviving sacrifice, but he promised all of them that he would live and survive for their sake. He smiled at what little fond memories he had with the tailed beasts and sighed as memories came to the forefront of his mind. Uzumaki-san, a deep and gruff voice said behind the blonde, who slowly turned to look at the speaker. Naruto noted his plain features and the uniform he wore. The all-black attire with white gloves was a standard thing in the police forces around the world. Most of the manpower was regular people with a bit of hand-to-hand training. None of them were on the level of shinobi. He smiled warmly at them before turning away from the monolith. "Can I help you?" he asked them kindly as he placed both hands inside his pockets. Naruto, by now, was used to strangers approaching him. The man was famous after all, seeing as he saved the world from a power-hungry psycho. Men, women and children approached him for autographs or pictures. Sometimes they just wanted to talk about the old days of the shinobi, and Naruto was more than happy to regale them of his past adventures. "The great and honorable council wishes to speak with you." The way the man spoke, the way he looked at Naruto sent a tremor down the boy's being, and before he could ask why he was being summoned, he blacked out. The council's main hall was as big and as gaudy as he remembered the last time he was there. Hundreds of men and women differing in age and status looked down on him from their seats with sneering faces. When Naruto came to and saw the looks in their eyes, the shinobi could already tell that he was being condemned. He felt shock at what they were doing to him, and then anger. "After all I've done? After I bled for you, killed for you, suffered for you, this is how you thank me? This is how you remember the sacrifices we made for your safety and lives?" His voice neither rose in pitch nor in volume. His eyes didn't blink as he locked eyes with every single member before letting out a defeated sigh. Sadness overtook his form as he slowly knelt down in front of the council, head bowed in defeat. Naruto felt tired all of a sudden, like the years of fighting had finally caught up to him in his weakest moment. The man didn't want to fight anymore because he saw it as a pointless struggle. Raising his hand was just too troublesome. The head of the World Council, an obese man with a balding head and hair on his double chin, stood from his throne-like chair to look down his nose on Naruto. If the last Jinchuriki could remember correctly, the man was one of the former daimyos, but for the life of him couldn't remember the pig's name. He raised a pudgy hand in the air to silence the roaring crowd around him, and cleared his throat to speak. Uzumaki Naruto, you are fast becoming a relic of a dead era. A weapon of mass destruction is not needed in our peaceful society, and therefore the council has decided dash. Let me guess. Naruto cut in as he couldn't stand watching the man's flabby neck jiggle any longer. You're planning to do away with me? I'm a ticking paper bomb that's just waiting to explode all over your faces. He couldn't help but laugh at how obvious these people were and how utterly stupid the people had become. Naruto looked up into the crowds with crimson eyes blazing as the scars on his cheeks thickened. The feeling of anger and hate was creeping up into his soul again, a feeling he hadn't felt in a while. Are you people just bored or something? Why are you even thinking of doing this to me? I'm the freaking Juubi. I am power incarnate. The council felt and saw his power explode all around him. The ground he stood on was literally torn up and flung all over the room. The blonde spoke again, but this time his voice had changed into a terrifying version of itself. My brothers and sisters in arms died to protect this world. To protect the sniveling masses who didn't know how to protect themselves. We gave our lives without a second thought, and yet here you all are disgracing their memory and sacrifice. The chains that bound him to the spot, forged and created to be unbreakable bonds, disintegrated into ash as he stood in all his might and glory. He was a vengeful god ready to smite the insects that lay before him. The council screamed in fear as they looked into his eyes as red as blood and as menacing as the void. All the civilians expected death in the coming moments, but thankfully nothing came. As all of them collected their persons off of the floor, they all looked down on Naruto, who by now was sitting on the damaged floor. What is the meaning of dash? The council had tried to speak again, but Naruto cut the man off. The Jinchuriki didn't know why he wanted to piss off the land whale, and frankly didn't care either way. Go ahead and seal me up, you spineless bastards! And please try your best. He laughed at their gobsmacked faces before he crossed his wrists together, a sign of surrender. Because once I get out of it, I'm not coming back as one of the good guys anymore. Believe it. They dragged him off to the room of sealing, where he would be bound to the earth to be never seen again. Before the guards took him, the council saw a glint in his eyes that scared them more than his display of power a moment ago. The wars Naruto fought left him a changed and broken man, and he hung by a thread of hope because the world had attained peace. He held on for the people that died. But this final act of treachery was what snapped that hope. Naruto saw it in the people around him that they haven't changed. Just a few years after the war, and yet corruption was starting to pop up again. Power plays and backstabbing and political warfare was still present in their peaceful society. After everything they've been through? If they haven't changed, then they never would. The moment he woke up in the chamber and saw the sneering faces, Naruto's thread of hope disappeared. His hope in an eternal peace disappeared. It was all a lie. On that day of lies and deceit and betrayal, humanity's shining hope, their champion against the pounding darkness, died. And through the ashes of the kind, yet broken man named Uzumaki Naruto rose the twisted mockery of him. All would learn to fear the true evil that would consume this world in fire and blood and war. Billions of years later. Jump City, California was a bustling district filled with shopping malls and nightclubs. Some people have called it a tourist trap, while others said that it was a city where an individual could start fresh. There were lots of opportunities present in the city for both rich and poor, young and old. Jobs were plentiful here and houses and apartments were sold cheap. The economy was constantly flowing in Jump City and didn't seem to slow down one bit. What's the reason for the booming businesses? Wayne Enterprises. The centuries-old company's presence in the city helped local business in many ways. Investors literally flocked to any city with an enterprise building present. People could get jobs from Wayne Enterprises as well, seeing as the company was always on the lookout for talent or man-force. Money flowed almost endlessly in Jump City. Of course, with money also came villains, both super and non-super. They terrorized the civilians with theft and robbery. Soon enough, the city fell into a state of chaos that threatened the livelihoods of the thousands of people that lived there. All seemed hopeless and lost. Then, like the sun splitting open the night sky, a group of superheroes arrived and culled the rising darkness back into hiding. The heroes, Robin, Aqualad, and Superboy, soon established a base of operations in Jump City and became their protectors. As their fame grew, so too did the heroes that joined their cause. The three teenage superheroes now had their own group, and together they protected Jump City from any villains who wanted to take advantage of the innocence the city held. So when there was trouble brewing in the district, the people of the city would look to the horizon to wait for the Teen Titans to save the day once again. It was on one of those days that Raven found herself looking up into the terrifying visage of their latest and possibly deadliest foe. The mission was supposed to be a simple one: to stop a museum robbery happening at midnight. The city's museum was hosting the famous Orb of Dreams, an ancient relic that was found deep beneath the ocean 100 years ago. The people who found it couldn't figure out whether or not the orb was a naturally made stone, but it was perfectly round with no sharp edges. There were markings on the surface written in a dead language, and scientists had said that the stone was as ancient as the dinosaurs, perhaps even older. The night of its arrival was also the night it was stolen, as a group of mercenaries came in the middle of the night, and broke into the museum. It was a good thing that alarms were patched into the Teen Titans headquarters as they arrived in the nick of time. The ensuing battle wasn't their most glamorous or most dangerous encounter, as the Titans were able to put most of them down. The last of the mercenaries, probably the leader of the group, was able to take a lucky shot at Raven. The bullet had just grazed the empathy on the arm, and the bloody bullet had ricocheted off of the Orb of Dreams, splattering it with Raven's half-demon blood. The reaction was slow, seeing that the Teen Titans were able to tie down the mercs while they waited for the police arrived. The orb was given a blood sacrifice, and thus caused the seal etched into its surface to glow blue with life. The symbols slowly lit up one by one. The more symbols that lit up, the bigger the orb got, and pretty soon the Titans had to evacuate the building. Not a moment too soon, as the ball erupted in a tornado of wind and fire that spiraled into the sky and causing the clouds to darken. "This isn't my fault, right?" asked Superboy as the rest of the heroes looked in awe and fear as the fire tornado compressed more and more until it disappeared entirely, leaving a destroyed museum and blackened earth in its wake. "Do we have to pay for that?" The final tongues of fire died down in wisps of smoke to reveal something, or someone, standing in the wrecked museum. Raven was the first to spot the stranger, and more importantly the first one to feel the crushing power emanating from him. She backed up a step as crimson eyes stared at her from the black smoke. Robin heard her gasp and turned from giving his report to the police to look at what was going on. "We have to get out of here, now!" Everyone was shock silent as the being appeared right behind the empath. The person stood at 6 feet tall with long, spiky hair at the top of his head. His eyes were the color of blood that did well to pull away the attention from his scarred cheeks. There were deep, jagged lines on each of his cheek and looked like someone had carved it with a blade. What else were interesting were his pointed ears as well as his clawed hands, nails extending into curved talons. His body type wasn't wiry and was not too bulky to let people think that he was a bodybuilder. It was in the middle, where one could say he was athletically active. He had no shirt on, but only a pair of flowing pants that flared at the bottom. The man had a smile on his face as he looked at the cowering Raven, who felt crushed by this being's aura. He tore away his gaze to look at his surroundings and consequently, the policemen who had surrounded him with guns drawn and aimed at him. The kind smile slowly slipped off of his face before he looked back at Raven. "I suppose I should thank you." His voice was deep and echoed out like he was in an empty hallway. One could describe it as ethereal, as it couldn't be categorized as something human. It was strange though, since the man spoke in a near whisper, and yet it echoed in the open streets. "Though these men pointing things at me could be misinterpreted as violent intentions." No one knew what happened next, but the police force that came to the crime scene had suddenly fallen to the ground without their heads. "No!" Robin couldn't believe what just happened. Who was this guy? "Now then, my little demonic savior, what reward do you ask from the Juubi, He leaned in closer and stopped only a few inches away from Raven's terrified visage. He smiled at her again before he traced a claw slowly down her jawline. The half-breed couldn't help the shiver that ran down her spine as she caught his scent. Before the man could lean in closer, A sharp projectile had embedded itself into the back of his hand. He screamed in pain as he violently pulled out the red, vaguely bird-shaped projectile and crushed it. "Ouch," he whispered. "That actually hurt." Although the wound was nowhere to be seen, the man still looked at the drying blood. It was actually a long time since he saw his own blood, and the sight of the crimson liquid mesmerized him. The only other time he had seen blood was from enemies long since past. Snapping back to reality, he turned to look at a boy wearing a costume consisting of green, yellow, and red colored. A domino mask was set on his face and covered his eyes in a white film. He had another sharp projectile in his hand ready to throw. There were others beside him as well. A dark-skinned teen whose body was encased in metal partly. He was pointing what looked like a miniature cannon at him, the large barrel glowing blue with power. Next to him was an orange-skinned female with fiery red hair, and in her hands were balls of green energy. Another girl stood beside her, but this one looked normal in terms of appearance. She had long blonde hair and wore a red corset-like shirt. There was a golden metal W on the shirt. There was also a hood attached to the shirt, covering her head. Behind the 4 teenagers stood another, wearing a black short-sleeved shirt with a stylized S printed on it. The boy had his fists up and was obviously preparing for a fight. "You little brats! How dare you! How dare you!" The man's voice boomed in rage as he quickly spun on his heel and faced the 5 teens, Raven momentarily forgotten. He took a single step forward and disappeared in a gust of wind. Robin was shocked at how fast the man moved. Even with his trained senses, the bow wonder couldn't find the man. The 5 made a circle with their backs facing one another, their preferred weapons drawn and ready to use at a moment's notice. "Wait, stop!" Raven screamed out from her spot. The other Titans turned to see the man in the middle of their circle with a raised claw ready to decapitate Cyborg. Raven, for one, was surprised that he actually listened to her, before she remembered something from one of her demonology books. It concerned sacrifices made to demons and summoning them. Raven could remember that if someone had offered their own blood as a tithe to the desired demon, then the summoned would have to grant a wish or follow any order that he or she asked of the demon. It wasn't absolute control over the demon, and the commands you could issue were limited and had to be very, very specific. The man seemed to struggle and fight the command as he still tried to bring his hand down for a decapitating blow. The Teen Titans slowly backed away from the blonde before turning to their local supernatural expert. Robin was the first to speak. "Raven, who is this guy?" The empath looked at the leader of the teen's superhero group before turning back to look at the man who had dropped his clawed hands to his side once more. I heard him call himself the Juubi." Raven had said the title like it was supposed to explain everything to her friends, but all she received were blank stares. She sighed before going into the explanation at what the Juubi was exactly. "In the beginning of time and space there was only darkness. In that darkness dwelled the Juubi, father to all that was and will be evil. A creature made of pure power, it stains all creation with its evil and insanity. What was once created to bring balance was now living for chaos and destruction." The now identified Juubi rushed into the group, throwing slashes wildly around him as the Titans scrambled to get away. Robin tried to jump away from one of the slash attacks but was caught unawares as the Juubi spun into a roundhouse kick that impacted his chest in a crunch. With the force of the spin, the Juubi dropped into a drop kick that sent Superboy hurtling through a building. Instead of falling to the ground, he sank into the ground like he was falling into water. Cyborg didn't even know what hit him as the Juubi slashed open his exoskeleton, exposing his inner circuitry. Raven panicked as she spread her arms wide, creating a black dome around the raging demon. "Stop it!" He didn't listen as he punched at the dome of energy. "Stop it!" Cracks formed around the dome as he continued his relentless assault. "I command you to stop!" And he did actually stop. Raven sighed in relief as she reinforced the dome back into perfect condition. She looked up at the man before gasping in surprise as his hand shot out of the impenetrable dome and clasped around her neck. The shock of the action caused her concentration to falter, making the dome disperse in a ripple. "Impossible! I gave you a direct command!" She tried to punch and kick her way free, but all it did was make him laugh. "Foolish, Idiotic, little demon, I am the Juubi. I am the demon, not some weak little rhyming reject. Star bolts from starfire rained down on his back, causing him to scream in pain and dropping the empath. He dropped to his knees gasping for breath as blood pooled down his back. A red lasso wrapped around her neck, choking the demon and sending currents of electricity through his battered body. That's for Super Bowl! Exclaimed Cassie Sandsmark, known to the world as Wonder Girl, as she channeled her anger into the magical length of rope. When smoke was starting to rise from his body, Cassie stopped using electricity as she fell to her knees in exhaustion. The demigoddess suddenly felt herself lifted up from the ground as pain exploded from her abdomen. The Juubi had used his insane speed to appear before the Amazon before he drove his knee upwards. I must be weak for divine powers to affect me so much. Wonder Girl coughed up blobs of blood as she tried to push her body off of the demon's knee. Spinning on his heel, the Juubi threw her into the flying starfire. The impact alone had them falling into unconsciousness before they hit the ground. He threw a kick backwards that caught Superboy in the throat. The clone hacked and coughed as his air supply was cut off. Azarath, Metrian, Zinthos! With the proclamation came a slab of cement from the museum. The ton of cement crashed down on the Juubi with absolute force. As the street finally grew silent, the Teen Titans regrouped near the destroyed museum. Robin was clutching his chest tenderly as a small trickle of blood escaped his lips. Cyborg was unconscious as Superboy carried him to safety. Wonder Girl and Starfire were woken up by the shaking Raven. That won't hold him off for too long, we need backup. Robin had to lean against the wall as the pain in his chest was getting worse. I agree. We need the grown-ups' help with this. 1. He collapsed to the ground as blood pushed up his throat painfully. Dignity was not an issue anymore as their lives were hanging by a thin piece of thread just after a few minutes of fighting with the so-called duty. The boy Wonder took out his communicator before inputting the frequency that connected to the Justice League's main headquarters. The small LCD screen came to life and the visage of the Man of Steel, Superman himself, answered the call. Robin? This is a surprise. The jovial smile on the man's face slipped as he saw the state of the Teen Titans. What happened? Robin ignored the worried tone of one of the strongest superheroes in existence as he tried to catch his breath. Huge problem, need assistance. The coughing fit the boy had made him miss Superman rushing off to the teleporter room. They went still when the slab of concrete crumpled to dust and there stood the Juubi, wounds and blood covering most of his body. This guy won't stay down, Wonder Girl said in fear as she readied her lasso in front of her. The rest of the Titans tried to take up fighting stances, but the injuries they sustained were causing them pain just by moving. The man was breathing heavily as he wiped off the blood covering his eyes. He growled in anger as the wounds were still bleeding. His bones felt like shattered glass after the last attack and his lungs were punctured. His right arm was bent at an odd angle, the elbow pointing the wrong way. Enough games. Enough, enough, enough. Enough! The Teen Titans felt only fear when steam rose from the wounds before they instantly closed by themselves as he once again rushed at the superheroes. His speed was still unmatched, and therefore no one saw it coming when he snatched Raven and reappeared on the roof of a nearby store. Why consort with these humans, little demon? Why do you strike down your own kind? I'm nothing like you. Raven screamed vehemently as she tried to pry off the grip on her neck in vain. Still, his grip was like iron as it didn't even waver from holding her in the air. The man laughed uproariously at her exclamation of being nothing like him. Let me fill you in on a little secret, Raven. It was the first time the Juubi had said her name, and the way he said it made her blood run cold. There is no full demon or half demon. There are only the ones who know their true names and those who dash. A large fist slammed into the side of his face and sent the demon spiraling down to the ground in a heap. Superman caught Raven before she could fall as well. Behind the Man of Steel stood Green Lantern as well as Batman, the Dark Knight of Gotham. The Juubi slowly crawled out of the small crater that his body created after crashing down from the roof. The force of Superman's punch had collapsed the right side of his face partially, and it was producing steam in copious amounts. His eye was a bloody mess, and it was only starting to reform the iris. The demon growled in anger at being manhandled by these mere mortals. For some reason his powers and invulnerability wasn't responding to his commands. He was feeling pain, and he wasn't as fast as he should be. Plus, these people were actually getting the drop on him. Wait. He stood up straight as a realization hit him. He was performing in half capacity only because his body was using the blood of the one who summoned him as a template to create a physical body in the mortal realm. The Juubi inhabited a body that was not strong enough to contain his full essence, and the only way to remedy this was to alter the host's body. His red eyes snapped up to Raven and a plan formed in his head. "That's enough from you," the man in the red cape told him as he floated in midair with both hands crossed over his chest. The real threats that the Juubi could see were the three people who had just arrived. The man wearing blue and the one in green were the biggest threats, while the man dressed as a bat was just another human. The Juubi relaxed his stance slowly before looking around him. The Teen Titans were at the end of the street still, and Raven had found her way back to her friends. "Who are you to stand in my way?" His voice was rather calm considering the circumstances. Superman eyed the being carefully before he answered the question. "We are the protectors of this planet from all threats within our society and outside." He didn't notice the Juubi slowly gathering energy into the palms of his hands. The man smiled at Superman, a malicious and dark smile. He raised his hands as if in surrender, before 3 balls of red energy sprung to life in each hand. "Then protect the humans! Catch these if you can!" With a wordless command, the balls launched forth into the distance. Their speed was comparable to missiles. Superman and Green Lantern rushed to stop whatever those things were and left the Teen Titans and Batman to the mercy of the Juubi. Said Demon looked at the black-clad man before scoffing. "You do not pose a threat to me, human. Why don't you just lie down and die?" Batman couldn't help the smirk that broke his scowl as the Batwing flew overhead and bombarded the Juubi with 20mm rounds. His back was shredded by the bullets meant for other aircrafts, and screamed in pain again as one of the bullets literally tore one of his arms off. He wasn't done, however, as the Batwing went for another round and dropped a bomb on him. But instead of an explosion accompanied by fire, cryogenic fluids doused him from head to toe and instantly froze him on the spot. The Teen Titans could only gape at how Batman defeated the Juubi without even moving from his spot. "That was awesome!" Superba couldn't help but comment as he helped his fallen friends off of the ground and approached the Dark Knight. Before anyone could celebrate, the eyes that contained the ancient demon started to steam up as a red glow permeated from within. The ice melted into water and out walked the demon whose teeth were chattering. He looked at Batman with hate and anger before he motioned his right hand to a fist. The water beneath him suddenly moved and lashed out at the heroes in a wave of crushing water that floored all of them. As they tried to get rid of the nausea from the attack, the Juubi approached Raven before fisting his hands into her hood. "No more games!" He grabbed her by the waist before disappearing in a flash of light before anyone could react. Both of the demons appeared atop a snowy mountain. Raven had tumbled down the slope a bit before she stood up. The Juubi didn't seem fazed at all as he stood in the blizzard winds with nothing but his tattered pants on. He had his arms crossed over his chest as Raven tried to stand on the 4-foot-deep snow-covered terrain. He slowly made his way towards the empath with equal, measured steps. Raven was about to attack him before a fist buried itself in her abdomen, making her cry out in pain. "There is no full demon or half demon," the Juubi started as he kicked Rave down the slope hard. "There are only those demons that go by a mortal name and those who are given their true names." As soon as the empath rolled to a stop, the Juubi had placed a foot on her back to keep her still. "You go by the name Raven or Rachel Roth. That is not your true name and thus you are incomplete." He pulled Raven's hood off of her head to look into her eyes. "Without your true name you cannot access your full potential as a demon. And since you have not realized, you have not ascended into your full glory, either can the body your blood has given me." The smile he gave her was crooked and full of fangs and malice. The Juubi spread his arms wide and proclaimed to the heavens, "Be honored, little demon! I, the great Juubi, shall give you your true name." The sky darkened as storm clouds gathered around the mountain. Lightning came to life and struck the ground around the both of them. The snow melted beneath them and the very earth itself turned ashen as the Juubi gathered as much energy as he could into the limited body of his. Even with just a fraction of the mighty demon's power, he was still able to curse a land with his malevolence. Slowly the earth cracked and hot steam rose from the ground before lava spewed forth. Even though you struck me down, even though you have been consorting with the humans, I shall not leave a debt unrepaid. He cupped her pale cheeks into his hands as he leaned in close to the empatha's face. Rise up, Proserpine, archdemon of pride! The Juubi kissed her then, putting all of his darkness and malevolence and insanity into her mortal being, into her very soul. The changes were instantaneous. As her shoulder-length hair lengthened to the middle of her back, silver streaks appeared in random lengths all over. A pair of horns slowly rose from the side of her head, pointing 2 feet in the air. Her trimmed fingernails lengthened into black claws. 2 leathery wings grew from her back and spread around her in all of their glory. Each of her wings were twice her height and as dark as midnight. A 3-foot-long tail grew from just above her backside and tapered off into a claw-like end. Raven's teenage body aged and matured into their peak and would forever stay that way. When Raven opened her eyes, the once indigo-hued orbs were now crimson with slit pupils. As the power coursed through her veins, Raven couldn't help let out a sigh of contentment from her lips. Sharp fans peeked from her upper lips as she tasted the ashen air. Her hands roamed her developed body, and she couldn't help smirk in appreciation on how her body filled out. If this was how a true demon felt, then Raven would have done so sooner. How do you feel, Proserpine? With her heightened senses, Raven could actually hear through the demonic tinge of his voice. The Juubi sounded like a young man in his 20s, maybe even younger. With her new eyes she could see the once invisible aura of power around him. Like his eyes, the aura was crimson and slowly brushed against her pale skin. I feel faster, stronger, powerful. If I knew I would feel like this, then I would have found out my name, true name, sooner. She laughed to the heavens as she flared her power needlessly. Gale force winds thrashed the terrain further as she spread her new appendages as far as she could. And please, she continued as the black aura around her form dissipated back into nothingness, call me Raven. And you can call me Naruto. Naruto, doesn't that mean fish cake? She giggled at how he scrunched up his face in irritation. It would seem that she had hit a nerve. Whirlpool, little demon, my name means whirlpool. Naruto scratched the back of his head before sighing. Is the hunger kicking in yet? Oh yes, I feel like I could eat a horse or something. Disguise yourself then, Raven. He was about to take off but suddenly remembered that the world was much more different than when he had left it. Plus, being stuck in the void for such a long time, billions or millions of years, had destroyed his once legendary sense of direction. He spun around on his heel and looked at the newly minted archdemon and said, Why don't you pick a place to eat, yes? I literally have no idea where to go nowadays. Raven struck a thinking pose with a finger to her chin before a light bulb flashed on in her head. She turned to Naruto with a smile, wholly misplaced with how she looked now. Has the Juubi ever tried pizza? The Teen Titans headquarters was deathly quiet as the whole contingent tried to wrap their minds on the idea that Raven was gone. Robin was grasping at his hair in frustration at how his team, his friends, could have been so soundly defeated. He thought that Raven getting kidnapped was his own failing, as whatever mistakes the Titans did was his fault as their leader. Batman stood behind the boy Wonder, silently giving the boy his support the only way he knew how. Superman and Green Lantern were down at the medical bay getting their wounds treated. The orbs of light that the Juubi threw were highly explosive and acidic enough to eat through the emerald light of the Lantern's ring and burn the last sun of Krypton. If they hadn't stopped those attacks, then most of the western coast would have suffered nuclear fallouts. Beast Boy, who was on the other side of the city on another mission at the time, felt guilty for not being there to help his friends. The Kid Flash and Red Arrow were huddled with the other Titans in silence. We need to know who we're up against, suddenly exclaimed Robin as he stood from his seat. He turned to address everyone present. Help me get Raven's books on demonology. The more we know about this Juubi, the easier it is to deal with him next time. I promise there will be a next time. It was strange seeing the world so different, and yet so similar to what he could remember. Buildings were larger and more symmetrical, roads were paved with cement and asphalt, there were things called cars all over the place, and the clothes. There were men and women here wearing things that his godfather, rest his soul, would have loved seeing. The experience was an eye-opener to the ancient demon, and the influx of information on how things changed was making him dizzy. He was happy to note that some things stayed the same. People were still killing one another, still robbing, still hating. Naruto breathed in all of the negative and malicious energy in the air and sighed in contentment. It was like pure oxygen to him, and made his immortal body swell with power. Looking to the side, Naruto noticed Raven swooning as well. A blush had adorned her cheeks and her eyes were heavy with an emotion he was intimate with. "It feels amazing, doesn't it?" Naruto said with a chuckle as he helped Raven stand on her own two legs. The empath looked up to the demon and gave a shy nod, uncertain of what was happening. "This is one of the amazing perks of being a demon," he said, "feeding off of the negative energy sentient creatures release into the atmosphere." Raven's knees buckled underneath her as a tidal wave of the energy washed over her. Naruto sighed in relaxation as it too affected him. "You feel that? That was someone committing the crime of murder, delicious." How does it work?" asked Raven with a slight stutter since her body was having small tremors. "Fuck if I know, sweetheart. What I do know is that it makes us stronger and faster. It grants us the use of our powers. And of course, since there will always be evil hand in hand with good, then it grants us the power of immortality. We demons, true named demons, are deathless. Because, let's face the facts, as long as people can choose to be good, there are people who also choose to be evil." People were staring at the duo that stood in the middle of the street. One was a man who stood 6 feet tall while his partner only stood at about 5'7" and was obviously female. What were peculiar about them were the horns sticking out of their heads. The man's horns were patterned like a crown of sorts. There were 2 half-foot-long horns at each side of his head with 3 2-feet-long horns at the front and back. The woman only had 2 horns that grew out of her temples and shot up straight in the air at 2 feet. Now the people of Earth had encountered many things throughout the years, like aliens, supervillains and monsters, and they had gotten used to it. So it wasn't a surprise that a crowd slowly formed around the two, taking pictures and exclaiming loudly at what they could possibly be. Naruto didn't take it too kindly though, as the flashes from the camera were agitating him more and more. No one seemed to notice who the woman was, and Raven could understand. With her transformation, the empath looked older. She had grown taller, and her hair was longer now. She wasn't even a teenager physically anymore. Plus, her clothes had suffered through the transformations and were now in tatters. Her outfit now resembled a strapless and backless swimsuit. Plus her cloak looked more terrifying with how torn up it was. Raven didn't know why she didn't feel embarrassed, what with every human staring at her. Maybe she didn't mind anymore because she had enough power in her pinky finger's nail to obliterate anyone who looked at her funny. Maybe she wanted them to look at her and fear her so she could feed off of the emotion. Maybe it was because, in her transformed and twisted psyche, Naruto was the only creature worth her notice. "Observe, little Raven, how the mortals look at us. See the fear in their eyes and trace how far that fear goes." The grin that Naruto manifested frightened the people around them. "Some fear us because we are unknowns. Others fear us because of their beliefs, as they should, since we really are demons. As for the rest, they fear us because we are different. We are not part of their routine." And Raven did look into their eyes. She saw the fear and suspicion festering in their very souls. Were they like this when she was only half a demon? Were they so fucking stupid? A hand on her shoulder made the demon turn to look at Naruto, his red eyes glowing with power and malice. "Here, let me show you what a fraction, just a pinch, of our powers can do." Naruto brought her closer to his chest, letting the archdemon rest her head on his chest. "Watch and enjoy the show." A ripple of air slowly moved away from the pair in a dome, touching the crowd in a silent gust of wind. A few seconds passed before the effects were seen. Screams started to echo out from the crowd, from the whole city, as people, good, bad, men, women, children, men, started to beat each other to death in a maddened frenzy. Naruto looked on and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mortals were so easy to manipulate, and so fun to watch. This is what happens when their fears control them. Surprisingly, it was Raven who said this as she watched in awe as a child, no older than 10, took down a man 3 times bigger than him. The child was using a discarded liquor bottle to beat the man's head in. The true face of humanity is shown right in front of me. A society built on fears and deception is reduced to rabid animals. I should feel sorry for them. But all I can do is. There was no time for pride in this matter. The Teen Titans had called for help with the Justice League to help them in their time of need. Robin contacted his mentor, Batman, for information pertaining to the demon Juubi. With the Dark Knight's extensive knowledge on all things mundane and supernatural, he was one of the best people to talk to on such short notice. It had only taken a few minutes for the Titans to get a response from the Justice League, but it was not who they were expecting. Wonder Woman? Robin asked in confusion as the Amazon's image appeared on the large monitor located in the Titans' living room. Wonder Woman, aka Diana of Themyscira, was one of the most well-known and strongest figureheads in the superhero society. The Amazon Princess was one of the founding members of the Justice League and was once the ambassador for the Department of Metahuman Affairs. I overheard Batman talking about your demon problem, and I believe I can help. She typed in a series of commands to bring up an image of an old Greek marble carving depicting a mass of people, being hovered over by a giant mass of writhing shadows. In the middle of the shadows was one giant eye ringed multiple times and had comma-like marks on each ring. Comparing them to the carving of the shadow, the people were like ants to it. The Greek gods encountered this demon almost 1,000 years ago. The image disappeared and Wonder Woman came back with a grim expression. It took Hades, Poseidon and Zeus himself to stop it, and they only survived by the skin of their teeth. You're not going to handle this alone this time, Robin. Batman appeared beside Wonder Woman, a deep scowl on his face. This demon is more than anything you kids have encountered so far. We're bringing in the big guns for this. It was strange how the world had changed so much, yet he still stayed the same. The things he once knew about society and how the world worked changed so much that one would think that they were on an alien planet. For Naruto it would have been true, since even the people changed. Metahumans, the term used for people or beings with extraordinary abilities. True, they weren't as awesome and mighty as the shinobi of old, but there were still some tough sons of bitches out there. Superman, the Man of Steel, was a prime example. The extraterrestrial was strong enough to rival Tsunade's strength, if not more. He wasn't the only one who could rival a Kage-class shinobi without breaking a sweat. He had learned from Raven that there were beings out in the vast universe that could destroy worlds. Naruto could destroy the universe as well if he was so inclined, but he didn't like to brag about it. Well, he would brag. Raven looked at her master in rapt attention as he went through different emotions every minute. Being an empath who had to suppress her feelings, she was intimately knowledgeable of every emotion possible. Confusion, anger, and a bit of sorrow were the few emotions Naruto went through. Master? Raven inquired as she placed a dainty hand on his shoulder. What shall we do now? It was a question to distract the demon, but also an important one. The whole planet would be after them when they found out that Naruto had killed off an entire town by pumping them with enough fear and paranoia to cause everyone to go on a mad killing spree. Hopefully Raven was enough of a catalyst to give him his full powers back. With her new demonic blood, Naruto was also granted a full demon body. Of course, there was a difference between the old one he had as well as the physical body trapped within the celestial void he was sealed into. He needed a way to get that one back. But for now, his limited abilities would have to suffice. We are waiting, Naruto simply replied as he stepped over a man's body which was run over by the pickup truck a few feet away. Waiting for what, my master? Naruto quickly spun on his heel to face Raven, hands outstretched at his sides. The whole universe is now a stage. The players are quickly gathering and going to their places. With the arrival of the director. Here Naruto placed a hand on his chest to emphasize that he was the director. There would be players coming to me like moths to a flame, vying for my favor. Allies? The empath asked as understanding dawned on her. Actors for the show, my dear Demonis. If I had my way, then they should be following the script I laid out for them. Are you not powerful enough to take them all by yourself? Raven asked innocently. The insinuation that he was weak was not lost on the second Juubi, and the empath found a clawed hand around her neck. Strong and powerful I am, but I am not stupid. A tree does not survive through one root alone. He leaned in close to whisper into his ward's ear. Do not spout out nonsense again, Proserpine, or you'll find me a terrible punisher. Forgive me, my master. I did not intend to insult. When his grip loosened, Raven could only crumple to the floor as Naruto's crimson gaze bore into her. Before Naruto could reprimand her some more, a sudden build-up of energy in the middle of town caught his attention. A hole in space opened to reveal a small army of blue and gold-clad humans approaching the two demons. There! Those two are the source of that foul energy! The apparent leader, a brute of a man with bulging muscles, proclaimed as he raised his white staff and shot a bolt of lightning at Naruto. For the Juubi's part, the demon casually backhanded the attack away, not minding that the attack had burned off the skin of his hand and the bones could clearly be seen. It seems I was wrong. This body does not compare to even a fraction of my former vessel's might. Even with Raven's demon blood augmenting it. I must get it back soon, thought Naruto as he watched at least 20 men and women approach him. They are sentinels of magic, foot soldiers of Dr. Fate, a lord of order. Raven applied for Naruto. Individuals who have the ability to harness magic, that's what they are mostly comprised of. One of them foolishly charged at Naruto with a raised magic staff, ready to clobber the ancient being. All he got was a kick to the chest strong enough to snap his spine backwards and kill him. The Juubi snapped his hand out to catch the staff in midair. Unexpectedly, the staff reacted to its new wielder by morphing into an ashen version of it. A human skull topped the staff. Interesting, Naruto said as he poured his power into the staff and thrust it into the incoming mob. A vile, black mist shot out from the skull's eye sockets and easily engulfed the sentinels in its deadly shroud. Most were able to dodge the cloud of death, but those unlucky enough were turned into horrid abominations of their former selves. Those who were touched by the death cloud were turned into zombie-like creatures, flesh rotting off of their bones while their soulless eyes burned with hunger. Their veins could be easily seen pumping a liquid akin to magma throughout their body. Capture all of them alive! He commanded without pause as dozens of the abominations quickly dashed at the remaining sentinels. What are they? Raven asked as a few of the creatures remained to protect their master from any attackers. They look surprisingly like the damned souls back in hell. Very interesting. A battle of epic proportions broke out in the middle of the town as the sentinels did not hesitate in trying to put down the monstrosities. The damned souls, however, puked out the magma-like liquid from their mouths on their enemies. The attack did not burn them, however, instead whatever was touched by the liquid was covered in stone to immobilize. Their numbers were quickly diminishing as the damned souls shrugged off any attack without caring if a leg or an arm was blasted off their bodies. The only logical way to get rid of the walking corpses was to completely destroy the body, but none of the sentinels had the will step enough to kill. Well, re-kill a comrade. Justice League Watchtower. The Moon. Every active hero on the League's roster as well as other superhero teams was gathered in the main hall. The Dark Knight Batman was busy typing in commands into the main supercomputer while Superman and Wonder Woman stood at his sides. He was using the tower's long-range scanners to scour the planet for any traces of the demon and the kidnapped Teen Titan. So far they didn't have any luck yet. Everyone was quiet as they watched the screen light up from time to time. It was always amazing to see the tower in full use. Sometimes people thought that the watchtower was just a building on the moon. They tend to forget the equipment installed in it. Any luck? Superman asked quietly. He didn't want to break the silence the hall had descended into. Batman looked at the screen for a moment before shaking his head. Nothing so far. If we're lucky enough, they might still be on Earth. If we're not, then they're probably not in this dimension anymore. If it comes to that, then we'll have to get in contact with Dr. Fate. He won't be enough to stop that demon. Zeus and the other gods of Mount Olympus were barely able to push him back into his prison, quipped Wonder Woman as she crossed her arms in irritation. What chance do we have against the likes of this Juubi? It's not like you to be this pessimistic, Diana. Superman turned to his friend and gave her a caring, if a bit strained, smile. What's wrong? If the gods struggled to contain this demon, then what chance do we have? We've fought gods before and we've won. Superman fights a god almost annually and he wins against them too. I'm pretty sure that we can take this demon on. It was Batman who spoke this time, not even turning away from the screen as he spoke. But this is more than doubt, isn't it? With the end of the question, Batman turned to look at the Amazonian princess as well. Diana sighed as she pinched the bridge of her nose between her right pointer and middle finger. The combined stare down of Clark and Bruce were getting on her nerves. This demon was told to us back when I was but a child. He was the monster parents tell their children at night to make them behave. In Themyscira it's different. They tell us how they struggled against this demon, a demon that destroys mountains with a flick of his wrist. Wonder Woman let out another sigh as she leaned against the window that showed a view of Earth in the distance. This was the monster in our closet. He was the one who scared us into obeying our orders. He was the one who would steal naughty little girls in the dead of night. We knew that he would reappear sooner or later, but I never thought that I would be alive to see the day the demon returns. You say it like it's the end of days with this Juubi reappearing, Flash said after being silent for so long. And besides, when this demon pops its ugly head again, then the Justice League will be there to stop him. We've done far more dangerous things than fighting a demon. I mean, here he gestures to the hundreds of heroes standing in the hall with them. We've got the most powerful heroes as our allies. And none of us would ever let some billion-year-old demon destroy our home. With his speech came the growing cheer as everyone in attendance agreed with the Flash. Does that answer any of your doubts, Diana? Asked the caped crusader. Even though he wasn't smiling, it was evident in his voice that he wholeheartedly agreed with his fellow superheroes. Wonder Woman couldn't help but smile as well. Although the Flash's speech wasn't the best she heard, it still did its job in lifting her spirits. Come hell or high water, the Amazon would stand against the Juubi with her friends by her side. Did you know that when a being is sealed into anything, the concept of time and space are distorted? You do not end up in a blank space just to float around in. Instead, you are thrust into a multitude of places all at once. You are suffocating in the vacuums of space, but at the same time drowning in an ocean. You are fighting for your soul in the pits of hell, but at the same time enjoying paradise in the clouds. A few seconds of this nightmare was enough to drive a man insane. A millennia of this was enough to create a monster like Naruto. No living thing was supposed to be sealed into an object because until the time where Naruto was sealed, no one else had done so. Reality was distorted in a seal and everything was not what they seemed. Naruto had grown into an intelligent and strong-willed man, but even he couldn't stave off the strain he was constantly under when he was in the seals, so eventually he broke. Boiling rage and a dark hatred was pieced together from the fragments of his mind. Hate instead of love, enemies instead of friends. And evil was born out of something good. Once again, the world turned its back on a creature sent to save it, and it came back to bite them in the ass. Naruto smiled in satisfaction as the space in front of his extended finger gave in and broke. Images and sounds screeched and rippled in protest as the demon forced his way between the cracks of reality, and created a shortcut right to the doorstep of Dr. Fate. The doorway is open! Raven, get rid of the unneeded and follow me. He turned to look at his apprentice of sorts before stepping into the swirling portal and disappearing. Raven gave a mute nod before looking at all the captured sentinels of magic, as well as the abominations, slowly floating in a magic bubble built by the demoness herself. With a negligent wave of her hand, like she was just swatting away an errant fly, the dark bubbles constricted before imploding. The occupants were brutally crushed into a fine red mist. When the duo had captured the remaining sentinels, Naruto had siphoned their magics to force open a portal. Naruto's powers were destructive in nature, and something like cross-dimensional portals was something just out of his grasp of understanding. So instead of trying to make his own portal, Naruto cracked open a mind, stole the memory of how to make one, and then used the life essence of the sentinels to create a portal to their headquarters, where Naruto was sure Dr. Fate was. In the distance stood the structure known to the sentinels as the Tower of Fate, the home of the Doctor. The tower was made out of pure brick and had no visible doors or windows. Naruto could feel the power radiating around and within the tower. It was such a terrifyingly overpowering sensation that Raven could not support herself any longer and fell to her knees. The energy around is absolutely blinding. Tell me again, dear Raven, who is this Dr. Fate? The promise of battle made his blood burn in anticipation. One of the most powerful beings to ever exist. A powerful sorcerer and W with his cloak, his H-helm and amulet. The demoness had to take in a lungful of air as the power was slowly suffocating the oxygen from her body. Seeing Proserpine suffering, Naruto sighed in exasperation before releasing his own formidable aura to counteract the other. Like a blanket, Naruto's red aura surrounded her and empowered her body with strength. With newfound energy, she stood up without assistance before smiling at her master. Thank Y dash. What are my chances against him? Naruto asked bluntly as he scanned the area, seeing no visible traps and no hidden ambushes. He had to ask himself if there were anyone around. Please forgive me, master, but I do not know how powerful you are. Naruto smiled at the proclamation before shrugging off the black overcoat he wore, showing off the plain undershirt he wore as well as the black slacks and leather shoes. Let's change that, shall we? Naruto took one step forward before a magical rune lit up under his foot. Raven's shock was evident as it quickly exploded and took Naruto's foot with it. But the demon didn't even blink as he moved on, the lost foot growing back in speeds that were impossible for anyone else. The closer he got to the Tower of Fate, the more runic traps activated. Magic used to devastate an army was bearing down on one man, one step at a time, and all he did was grin through the pain of having his body get ripped to shreds. Show me what this body can do. Through a magical mirror, Inza Kramer, the wife of Dr. Fate, Ken Nelson, watched the progress of the blonde-haired demon through the traps she and Ken had set up an hour before his arrival. With the Helm of Fate, Ken knew that the sentinels he sent would not be enough to stop Naruto, nor were the traps outside enough to kill him. Dr. Fate would have to go out into the field himself and repel the Juubi. He did not know if his powers were enough, nor if he would even survive the battle. Every time he tried to look into the future, his visions were dark as the void. Never before had this happened, when the future was not written in stone. When his destiny would be decided on who was stronger, who was faster, and who was better. Securing the cloak of destiny around his frame, Dr. Fate looked into the mirror once last time before walking towards the exit. Before he could step outside, though, the voice of his wife stopped him mid-step. You don't have to do this. We could escape, call for help at least, she said. This is a foe unlike anything we have ever faced. We do not know his strengths and his weaknesses. All we have to go on are stories thousands of years old. No one has ever seen the true strength of this monster. And what choice am I left with? If I abandon the Tower of Fate, if I leave the power hidden within the tomes and artifacts housed in the tower? I have called the Society as well as the League, and hopefully they will come. I would have teleported them here, but if I left, then the defenses would not be as strong as they are now. Inza could see, through the white light that shone out of the eyes of the helm, Kent's eyes. It shone with determination. He will beat back this demon. But it also held fear, fear of not being strong enough to win. He straightened his back, and with one final step, he was outside the tower. The amount of destruction wrought on the open field looked like an atomic bomb had detonated. The earth was turned black from the fire, and any plants that once stood were nothing more than ash piles. In the center of the field, halfway to the Tower of Fate, lay a crater of massive proportions. Upturned rock and soil rumbled as they fell into the center. Raven calmly observed from a distance as Dr. Fate quietly landed on the lip of the crater. She did not fear for her master's demise. The demoness saw and felt his power erupt right before the final blast. She saw the titanic shadow through the smoke and fire. You cannot fool me, ten-tailed beast! Show yourself and face me! The roar of thunder echoed across the land as Dr. Fate gathered energy into his body. With his jaw set and fist curled, Kent was ready to fight. From within the smoke, a snort of amusement could be heard, followed right after by a strong gust of wind that blew away the rest of the smoke screen. As you wish. Titanic claws made out of pitch-black energy shot out and gripped the mouth of the crater. The sheer force made the ground quake and the sky rumble as those hands slowly lifted up Naruto into view. A shadow, at least 100 meters in height, stood above the land. There were no defining characteristics on the body, only 5 black tails of energy slowly waving around and its single eye staring at the superhero. The eye was colored red and had 3 black rings surrounding the pupil. On each of the rings were comma-like markings, 3 on each. Dr. Fate idly made note that the commas looked like Japanese magatama. Everything else looked like it was made from darkness itself. It still amuses me how you humans act like you even have a chance against me. Your bravado impresses no one, Dr. Fate. A ball of black energy created in a split second in front of where the Juubi's mouth should be exploded into a lance of scorching heat. The power behind the attack disintegrated the ground and would have vaporized the hero if he hadn't created a small pocket dimension to absorb the attack fully. The roar died down soon enough and Dr. Fate lashed out in return. A spear of lightning tore through the air and struck Naruto in the face, making him howl in pain. Before Naruto could attack again, dozens of spears made out of light pierced and passed through his body. Katan, Naruto exclaimed as a concentrated firestorm engulfed Dr. Fate before exploding violently. He raised a claw in the air before slamming it into the ground, followed by his other. Again and again he pounded Dr. Fate into the dirt, each attack getting stronger than the last. Naruto would have used Banbutsu Sozo, his most powerful offensive and defensive attack, but the price would be too high for his current state. Banbutsu Sozo was one of Naruto's most powerful techniques. With the mastery of yin and yang energy, Naruto could create anything from nothing. It was terrifying in the hands of Naruto, true, but the price of the technique was great. A tail of chakra would be sacrificed for the use of the Banbutsu Sozo for at least 2 hours and 40 minutes. If Naruto pushed himself to use the technique for a full day, that is, for 24 hours, then he would sacrifice 10 of his tails. Though not permanent, the time to recover a tail's worth of chakra would hinder him greatly. The cons would outweigh the pros of the technique since each tail was an indicator for how much power and chakra he had at his disposal. The less tails of energy stored within him, then the weaker he would become. With his current body, Naruto could only call upon 6 of his tails at the moment. Any more, then the frail vessel would start to destroy itself from the inside out. Charging up another Baijidama, Naruto was caught off guard when a glowing circle of runes appeared above his head before his first attack slammed into him in full force. His hands couldn't withstand the sheer power behind his own Baijidama and buckled. The impact made from his body and the attack that was pushing him down caused a cloud of dirt to shoot high into the air. Clever little insect. Size would not win this fight apparently. In a few moments, Naruto reverted into his chakra mode. The color of his eyes changed from red to orange in this form, and while his full-on Biju transformation gave him a near-impenetrable black chakra shroud, the chakra mode granted him a shroud that looked like it was made from yellow, flickering flames. Since he was the Juubi and not a Jinchuriki anymore, his form was made out of pure chakra and had no markings whatsoever. Naruto can use this form much longer than his full transformation, but the constant drain on his chakra reserves were still taxing. The longest he used the chakra mode and any of its variations was a full week without stopping. He burst into action and sped towards Dr. Fate, the boost in speed causing a sonic boom to part the smoke and reveal his target. By the look on his face, Naruto had caught him off guard with his transformation, and he took advantage of it as he created a pair of chakra arms to hold on to the hero's arms before shoving a Rasen Shuriken into his chest. Naruto didn't stop there as he proceeded to punch and clobber Dr. Fate into an unrecognizable pulp. He was going to finish him off finally, but Dr. Fate fizzed out of existence in a burst of static sparks. A clone technique? You do not see what is in front of you, demon. This will be your undoing! From the top of the Tower of Fate stood Dr. Fate, the solid illusion doing its job and distracting, hands outstretched in front of him as he manipulated the magic energy in the surroundings. Beneath Naruto, encompassing the crater where he stood, a runic circle with the shape of a jackal's head shone from the dirt. Burning skies and boiling seas seal this foul demon for eternity. Tomb of Anubis. Fuinjutsu, Kagama wo Raimen Shimasu. The spell Dr. Fate used was supposed to be able to banish powerful demons back to the underworld. The Tomb of Anubis spell kills the vessel of the demon and anchors down their soul back to hell. Not only would it banish the demon, but it will, at the same time, forbid them from climbing back out for at least a century. It was not a spell to be lightly used, seeing as the requirements for this certain spell was astronomical. Any normal sorcerer would be killed immediately, his life being siphoned into the runic seal to power it. Luckily for Kent Nelson, he had access to cosmic amounts of magical energy. Unluckily, he did not know that Naruto had achieved the status of sealing master back in the elemental nations. He, along with Jiraiya and his father, Minato Namikaze, were the only recognized masters in all of the lands. Instead of igniting into a pillar of white fire like it should, the seal exploded outwards. A wall of fire came to life from nothing and roared towards Dr. Fate, who was preparing another rune to counter. The wall of flames suddenly split in half to make way for a giant orb of black chakra. Naruto had thrown the unrefined Baijidama for a widespread effect rather than the concentrated beam. With flames dancing around his form, the Juubi extended his right hand forward with his palm facing the Baijidama. His eyes rippled, like a pebble falling into a pond, transforming into his true eyes once again. Shinra Tensei. The Baijidama suddenly lurched forward with great speed. Dr. Fate's surprise cost him greatly as the orb of positive black and negative white chakra sheared off the roof of the Tower of Fate, and the doctor with it. The orb continued along its path of destruction a few kilometers away before impacting the ground and exploding in a black mushroom cloud. Naruto exhaled tiredly as his chakra cloak receded, his clothes underneath none the worse. The Juubi could finally see the limits of his current body and was not at all impressed. Each technique he used was not as strong as they should be. He neither has his blinding speed nor his superior strength. Manifesting 6 fully formed tails were his limit, and the use of his true eyes made him cry blood. These few seconds that Naruto used to catch his breath was what Dr. Fate anticipated throughout their encounter. The doctor threw of the superheated cloak of destiny off of his frame, used to absorb the unrefined power of the Baijidama, before facing the direction where he knew the demon was. Kent had accounted for all possibilities before the fight and took every precaution. This was a creature of legend after all, said to have brought down the gods of Mount Olympus when it had broken free from its original prison. So when Naruto stepped onto a timed runic mass paralysis trap, built to subdue hundreds of individuals for 10 minutes, Dr. Fate went to work. He spoke the incantation quickly. Dozens of words in few seconds were spoken and imbued with power and reason. It was obvious that confronting the Juubi head-on was foolish, even if he wasn't as powerful as the legends say. Heat of 1,000 suns, destroy his soul. Heart of the eternal void, bind his form. Hear my cries and obey my order. I call upon the almighty power. The darkness will be banished on this holy hour. Dr. Fate raised his fist into the air, 5 fingers pointing to the skies as he forced more and more of his magics into the spell. The cloud split open as a thin beam of light cut through the air before splitting up into 10 smaller beams. The small bands of light struck Naruto's back before he could react. A roar of pain erupted from the Juubi as the light beams dug into his flesh before the ends facing out widened. Raven could only look in shock as the beams spewed forth what looked like black smoke out into open air. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Enough! The lights shattered as Naruto cast the yellow chakra cloak around his body, but before he could launch a retaliatory strike on Dr. Fate, Naruto's cloak fizzled out of existence before he collapsed to his knees in exhaustion. Raven saw her master in danger, and she quickly acted. As soon as she got a firm hold on Naruto, they teleported away from the Tower of Fate. When they made their escape, Raven had not accounted for the distance they would be traveling, thinking that her powers would compensate automatically as it always did. Raven also didn't account the fact that, if either her master or self were drained of their energies, then both of them suffered. No exceptions. The portal they were in for mere seconds suddenly rippled and spat both of them out. Raven was still able to land on both feet carefully while Naruto landed on his head. The vertigo that hit them both didn't help the situation they found themselves in. The Justice Society of America arrived just in time to see Dr. Fate mend the largest crater on the impromptu battlefield. Power Girl arrived at the scene first, sweeping the landscape with her superhuman eyesight. The leader of the JSA was followed by Stargirl as well as the Red Beetle. As soon as they knew for certain that the coast was clear, Dr. Fate led them inside the Tower of Fate to discuss on what he could glean from the Juubi during their battle. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. From what I could dig up from the labyrinth in his mind, he was born in a civilization thousands of years ago, in a parallel universe of our own. Dimensional demon, what else is new? Power Girl asked sarcastically as she crossed her arms under her impressive bust. With the repertoire of villains she had encountered over the years, few things could surprise the blonde. Quite, Dr. Fate replied with a nod. But his powers are something else entirely. He uses a form of energy that he can shape and manipulate freely. Naruto can either use this energy to make fire or control gravity. I do believe he can manipulate this energy to alter his physical form as well. Kent was rifling through the collection of books he had, trying to find a clue or answer to the mystery of the Juubi. What that energy exactly is, I have yet to find out. Snapping his fingers loudly, a 3-foot-tall, 3-foot-wide mirror rose from the ground and came to a rest in front of the collection of superheroes. Stargirl looked at the mirror questioningly before moving images appeared on its reflective surface. A full-body shot of Naruto stepping out of the portal he used to enter the subtle realm was the first to appear, garnering a reaction from Stargirl. Oh, he's a cute one. I mean a cute villain/demon thingy. She corrected herself when Power Girl looked at her scathingly when she made voice of her opinion. The video, for what else could it be, didn't stop there as Raven stepped out of the portal next in all of her demonic glory. Mixed reactions were received as they watched the images shift into Naruto transforming. Okay, what the hell is that? Red Beetle asked as the Biju proceeded to smash the ground where the doctor was on in the video before firing off a Baijidama. Thank the gods he didn't use those powers in a populated area. That thing's like an atomic bomb's explosive force was concentrated into a laser beam. When the video ended with Naruto's retreat, Dr. Fate spoke again. I was able to land a deciding blow at the end. Although it was not the effect I intended, I was able to slice a part of his soul from his body. This, of course, made him weaker. And from what I see, this bastard can feel pain. He isn't some all-powerful, invincible demon god like what Wonder Woman had implied. Power Girl nodded at her own conclusion. I'm not so sure that her statement was false. What do you mean? Stargirl asked as she leaned on her staff, after a few moments of silence. What I mean is that Uzumaki Naruto, the Juubi, is not a far cry away from being a god. I felt his power, and I have seen his soul. Both are fractured and pieces are missing entirely. This is where Raven comes into the equation. I have a theory on her new look, so to speak. In some point in time after her kidnapping, Naruto may have either possessed her or turned her into a demon. This was somehow given him a connection to Raven and her soul. With this link, Naruto can fill in the gaps in his own soul. Wait, does that mean the Juubi is trying to get back to his full strength then? With the display of his not 100% strength, no one wanted to think what that beam attack would be like if it was. It is the most logical conclusion. He may turn more people into demon. Who, I do not know. But the fact remains that we must stop him before he does. I'll go inform Superman. We need everyone in on this. Naruto woke up to the sounds of people shouting as well as screams of anger and fear. His eyes were unfocused and all he saw were blurry shapes in a black background. He couldn't make out any words either, just a muted buzz. Groaning in pain, Naruto tried to stand up but found that his right hand was broken at the wrist. This sent him face first into the pavement, again. Annoyed at his slow recovery speed, the Juubi summoned forth a chakra claw from his right shoulder to help him stand. He blinked a few times before forcing a bit more chakra into his eyes to speed up the healing process. Eyes were faster to heal than broken bones, he had learned. In a few seconds the world went back into focus. He was in a city if the skyscrapers were anything to go by. During his time in the elemental nations, he saw the rise of such buildings. Cities that were getting too big opted to build up rather than build out. The idea came from Amigakure, if he remembered correctly. The hidden village was basically built on top of a small island surrounded by water. They couldn't expand, so they started building up, placing building on top of one another to save the limited space they had. This dimension's skyscrapers were more sophisticated than his. Everything was made out of concrete, metal or glass, sometimes all three. The buildings were high enough to reach the clouds, and Naruto couldn't even think how that was possible. I'm expecting them to tip over any minute now. The buildings may look prettier, may be straighter and shinier. But the people were still the same, afraid of things that were new to them. For example, the situation he and Raven were in now. They were two completely new creatures in a city. One looked like a demoness about to bathe in the blood of the innocent, while the other looked like a roguishly handsome devil. On one side of the street there were people dressed in blue uniforms with shiny badges on their chests. On the opposite side of the street was a building filled with people bound and gagged behind a group of people wearing body armor and ski masks. What were the two things they had in common? Both sides were pointing guns at them, and both sides were shouting at them. Rude. Standing from his face-to-floor position made his back burn painfully. Dr. Fate's final attack had left deep, inch-wide and 3-inch deep wounds on his back. Naruto suspected them to be a sort of divine attack since his demonic chakra was slow in healing the damage. Naruto hated the fact that he couldn't just beat people up easily like the good old days. Now people were too unpredictable to read. No jutsus or hand signs or dojutsus. Naruto was the best in a fight back in the elemental nations because he could predict what type of jutsu his enemy would use and would prepare a counter accordingly. He needed to know his enemies. He needed to know what everyone was capable of, what their strengths and weaknesses. Who were the biggest fish in this new pond? Who had the most connections, which had power? Naruto was anything but an idiot. He knew that in this new playing field, he was just a dull butter knife while everyone was a Zanbato. He was a very large butter knife, but still dull. Charging head-on like what he did a few hours ago wasn't going to cut it until he was in the know as well as getting back in top shape. Whatever that wearing yellow underwear outside a blue jumpsuit superhero did to him, he couldn't feel the crisp and tight connection he had to his chakra. Everything was floating just out of his reach, and that just pissed him off. A loud bang behind him went off before a powerful impact made him lurch forward. Naruto felt his head throb in agony as something wet and viscous flowed down his neck. Raven slowly turned to look at the bank robber who shot Naruto, shocked that someone was stupid enough to do something like this. She didn't know whether to congratulate the man for having the courage to sign his own death warrant, or chastise the idiot for signing his own death warrant. You shouldn't have done that, idiot! So the empath decided on shaking her head. She didn't much care for any of them, police, robber or hostage. They were beneath her notice. All right, new plan of action. Go underground, get allies, get my old body back, conquer known universe. The Juubi straightened up from his slight slouch before firing off a mini Baijidama into the bank, killing everyone in the building as well as the building behind it. Behind Naruto, Raven gathered energy into her hands before flinging those outwards. The police as well as their vehicles were engulfed in black energy before being brutally compacted into a sphere just an inch wide. But first, get everything out of my system. Chapter end.